what an expert's going to testify to. In other words, what their expert opinion is. How did the expert come to that opinion? Did they formulate an opinion? Is that opinion based upon some science? Is that opinion affected by what somebody told them to find? This concept, this category of understanding how their opinions were formed, not necessarily the exact opinion, but what and how they formulated that type of opinion, is a nice area of inquiry. I might want to ask in this area, what are they utilizing in coming up with their opinions? Well, I used the experiment I did, my visual inspection, some standards that were written, I'm using my textbook, my experience, whatever they're using. I want to make sure I understand that. Again, go back to the exhaustion technique. If the person says, I'm using the set standards that are set out in this profession, I'm using my visual inspection, and I'm using my notes, I might say, what else, if anything, did you use to formulate your opinion other than, and then you repeat those things, other than your visual inspection, other than your notes, other than those standards? Because I want to box, I want to make sure in each area I am getting all of the information. Okay, yes, that is everything I used. Okay, later on it's going to be difficult for them to now go back on it and change their tune. Again, we don't care what the witness says so long as they say it, because we want to give them a chance. You can tell me you relied on 65 standards, but I want to make sure you've had a chance to tell me what those standards are so you can make the proper decision in this particular case, so that you can render the opinion based on what you're telling me is sufficient to render that opinion. I might ask them, once I understand what those items are, why they typically use that. Why do you typically use a visual inspection in this case to formulate the kind of opinion you formulated here? I don't care what they say. Well, visual inspection is the accepted standard. What if it's not? Or, I use a visual inspection because that's what I was taught. Okay, we're going to find out who they taught them that and why they were told that that was such a great way and why it was to the exclusion of other things, because they've already told you they didn't rely on anything else. Again, they might come up with an answer that explains why they used it that might give you additional information. Okay, what made you believe, or what is the reason why you look to your notes in evaluating that? Well, I looked at my notes because they give me a recollection of what happened. Okay, I might want to ask a bunch of questions about how much data he or she takes down when they're writing, why they write certain things and don't write other things, where are the facts which support that, and why aren't they looking at the actual fact pattern or the actual reports or other types of documents because they didn't mention them? Why is their notes the fundamental and only thing they can use other than the standards and the visual inspection? Is that the only written materials you could ever use other than the standards? The concept is, I want to learn. You're going to find out that most people don't tell you everything. You have to really exhaust them. And secondly, you want to do it because under the law, if I have asked them what their total finite amount of things they used in a particular area, it is fair for a court later on to prohibit them from adding anything different, because you're preparing your case based on what they say. You're giving them the right to say whatever they want. So I might want to find out all of the information I can that will enable me to understand all of the things they relied on in formulating an opinion. I might say, are those types of things what you use in every case involving an evaluation of a car accident, an evaluation of the braking distance of a car in a wreck, the evaluation of whether a surgeon performed properly, the evaluation of whether a person is suffering emotional distress? They might say, well, it depends. Okay, well, let's find out more about that. Well, tell me the variables. Tell me the circumstances under which you might use different types of methods, different things that are in addition to or as an alternative to your notes, your visual inspection, and the testing methods or the rules or those scientific methods that you're relying on? Well, it depends on whether the person suffered this or suffered that, or whether the accident occurred here, or what the type of accident that occurred, or when the day was. And again, we don't care what they say. I want to go through everything. And then I want to repeat. Besides the differentiation of when the accident occurred, that is, what time of the day it occurred, is there anything else that would change the fact pattern? No, yes, okay, you go through. Besides the time of day and whether or not the car was a truck or a car. What else? Well, that's it. That's really, okay, you see how I'm doing? In each case, I go out and exhaust because I want to make sure I don't get surprised later. So that's the understanding of making sure I'm getting that underlying basis for the formulation. I'm trying to learn why they use these methods here, why they wouldn't use these methods in another case, or why they would add other things in fact patterns that are different than here. And I might conclude with, if they say some other methodologies or things that they use, I might say, okay, you indicated that in a case where the car accident occurred at night, you would also use the special braking analysis put out by the Braking Association of America. You didn't find that it was important to utilize that here because this is a different fact pattern, right? Or, why didn't you utilize those? Well, because it was at night, Scott. Okay, all I've done is wrap that up. I've made sure that that witness has told me that there's a reason why they didn't use that here. And I've made that strong and clear by wrapping that section up. So you can see what I'm doing. Making sure that when I get into an area, I take baby steps and I exhaust, making sure I understand before I'm going to ask them what their opinions are. I want to understand all the bases because it's going to allow me later on to challenge that, or to understand that it is not challengeable, or to learn how the fundamental underlying components of their ultimate conclusion can be challenged. I might want to go into each one of their underlying analysis. If they say I used the certain scientific standards, I used the building code, I used the Surgeon's Journal to understanding appendectomies, whatever it is, the concept is that I might say, what other books do you believe are authoritative in addition to the Surgeon's Guide to Appendectomies? They might say nothing. They might say, well, there's another book. Well, why didn't you use that book in this particular case? I don't care what they say. Well, that book really doesn't cover this type of surgery. It covers appendectomies on kids, not adults. Whatever they say, helpful. They might say, well, it is a book you could use too. Oh, wow. Maybe, well, why didn't you include that book? What is it about that book, or the book you're citing now, that is the Surgeon's Guide to Appendectomies, that makes that book not usable or not preferable in this situation? Again, I don't care what they say, but you see how I went through the surgical step-by-step process. I am now empowering myself with knowledge. Whatever they take, if they have the book and they produce the book, or I have the book, I might go further and say, what sections of this book did you utilize in considering or rendering your opinion? I want to know whether they looked at it and didn't use it, or they looked at it and actually used it. They might say chapter 7. They're not going to say the entire book. If they do, then we're going to spend some time together going over each page of that book to say, how did this page help you? If that's the way they want to play it, well, we're going to follow their lead. So, properly, an expert might say, well, chapter 7 that governs appendectomies in emergency situations where the person is over 65 years old or has diabetes. Okay, let's go to that section. How many pages are in that section? 42. Are there any pages in that section that you believe are not related to your conclusion, that you didn't use, that you find to be irrelevant, whatever line of questioning you want to use? I don't care what they say. They say, we used it all. You might find in there something that's irrelevant. And so at trial, you might say, you said you used everything. You're a detailed guy, aren't you? Yeah. Well, did you use this? Well, no, I didn't. Well, did you use that? Well, no, I didn't. You just got done telling me that You used everything in that chapter. So now I'm creating something to argue to the jury later on that this person is just a broad-stroked person that isn't truthful and isn't honest and doesn't really tell you the details. Whatever the case may be, you can see that I'm not jumping over things. I don't care what the other lawyer says. I am telling you, this is a deposition of that expert. As I will tell you throughout other sessions, I don't look at the other people in the room. Not meanfully, but my witness, my job is to talk to that expert. I'm not there to debate the other lawyer. I'm not there to fight with other lawyers if they want to object. When they say objection, I keep looking at the witness. Unless that objection is instructing them not to answer, I say you can answer. Or they might object and the witness knows they can answer. Okay? The concept is that when someone looks at you, aren't you more likely to look back at them? When someone looks at you, don't you find it less respectful if you don't look back? If you were looking at a person and they were constantly looking at their phone, what would you think about the person's interest in you or what you're having to say? So, as a respect methodology, most people will look at you. If they don't look at you, that may also tell you something about their credibility. There's a number of techniques that we'll talk about in other sessions. Behavioral techniques. The movement of body, nonverbal techniques that tell you a lot about that witness and enable you to gather additional useful information. But here we're talking about the concept of, I want to have direct communication. I want to find out what they have to say. I want to know everything they're going to say. I don't want to be surprised later when they say something like, you didn't ask me that. Or, everybody uses that, you should have known better type thing. So, the important thing is I'm asking them everything that forms the basis of their underlying conclusions. Did you speak to anyone else? Or, who did you speak to in rendering your conclusions? Or before you rendered your conclusions? Or who else did you talk to in order to either gather information or in order to render your opinion, in order to consider what kind of opinion you're going to render? Remember, I'm not asking them the specifics of their opinion. Rather, I am asking them who they talk to gather information. They might say, well, I called my buddy at Yale, or I called my buddy who works in this industry. Well, I might want to depose that person. I might want to find out what are all the reasons why they called that person. Is that person authoritative? Is that person someone that they look to? Why do they look to that person? What are the qualifications of that person? Blah, blah, blah. You can see where I'm going. The concept is, I am going to make sure I understand who they spoke to. What other documents did you refer to in ascertaining, in coming to the conclusion that you're about to tell me? Tell me all the documents. Identify for me all the documents. List for me. Tell me everything that you used in evaluating that. That goes beyond just I used my notes and visual inspection. That says I actually used some communication that I had with someone else. Then you may be able to go back later and impeach them or criticize them because they didn't tell you about that. But the concept is, I want to make sure that I understand. They might say, well, I used my visual inspection of the things I saw, but I also took photographs. And I think that's what I mean by visual inspection, because I also took photographs that I took back. Or there was somebody else out in the site and I talked to them about it. Well, you didn't say that earlier. Well, I just asked them a few questions. Or I just asked them, well, I don't care what they say. Well, okay, let me go back to the beginning now. Okay, who else did you speak to in which you uttered any word of any kind while visiting that site? I called my mother. I don't care who it is. I want to find out. So the second I get that trigger, I don't get mad and get upset. I go, okay, let me rebox that. The key is, I'm going to stay moving forward. I don't have to prove that they're lying or whatever. Sometimes a deposition can be used to hurt somebody, but most of the time, I just want to gather everything. And then maybe later on, after I get their opinions, I might want to challenge them in some way. I might want to lock them into something. But right now, I need to know all the data. So I might ask them, okay, tell me everything else. Or once they identify with it, I might use the exhaustion technique. So in addition to this, this, and this, what else did you use? Nothing else. Okay, now we have all of the items and the people they talked to and the documents they referred to and the text they used. And now they are ready to render a conclusion. Or maybe they talk to the lawyer, and you can ask, well, what did the lawyer tell you to opine? Did the lawyer provide you with any information? Or what I like to do is the baby steps. How many conversations did you have with the client, or the lawyer, or the testing company? I had 3. Okay, what dates did you communicate with that testing company? I don't remember. I don't recall. Or January 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. I don't remember. I don't recall. Well, where would that recollection be reflected? For example, it might be in their billing. Let me ask you a question. Did you reflect all of your time that you spent in this case in some sort of written form? Or, said another way, how did you reflect the time that you spent in this case? Well, I wrote it down. Well, I have a billing program. Well, I took notes. Okay. How did you use that data, if at all, in order to answer my question of how you knew what dates you spoke to the testing company? Oh, well, I always look at my billing. Or, well, I memorized it. Or, well, I didn't look at it. I just remembered it. Okay. And then I go through the first conversation. Watch how detailed. How long was it? What time of day was it? Okay, who called who? What was the first thing that was said? They said, hello, I want to talk to you about the testing. Or you said, hello, I want to talk to you about testing. What did they say? And I used their answer. When you said, I want to talk to you about the testing, what were the exact words you remember? The person says, I don't remember the exact words. What would help you to recollect? Well, I took notes. Great. Or, well, nothing would help me to recollect. Okay, later on, they can't now tell you that they recollected. I don't care what they say. I'm finding out. I'm not jumping over hoops. So you see what I've done? I'm going to get that information. And then what did they say to you after you said blah? And what did you say to them after you said duh? And then anything else said? Or were there any other communications, any other words of any kind that you can recall were said in that conversation? Yes, no, I don't know. Okay, what would help you to know? Nothing. My shoe, my notebook, my notes, whatever they say. If they say an item, then I would say, okay, let's get that item. Let's find out from that person whether or not, or that item, whether or not it helps you to understand. Well, I remember because Joe was out there. I remember because it's in my bill. Let's go pull out the bill. And I'll say, now, you've had a chance to review the bill that I marked earlier. Or you marked that bill. Now, tell me what else you remember as a result of looking at that bill. Oh, geez, now that I see the bill, I remember I also asked them about X, Y, and Z. Okay, then I do my exhaustion technique. So besides blank, blank, and blank, what else, if anything, did you say? Or what other things besides blank, blank, and blank did you tell? Okay, nothing. Okay, I'm done with that. Okay, let's go to conversation number 2. Don't just allow people to say, well, I don't remember what I said, and that was it, and we just talked to them and they told me. Nobody gets on the phone, picks up a phone, and the person says, pH is 128, answer's 43, click. You know that and I know that. I don't care what pleasantries they say. It doesn't matter what they say. I want to make sure that I am painting a picture that this person is honestly reflecting a dialogue, a tendency of what they do, so that when I give it to a jury, I can either let the jury know or let the judge know that this kind of thing indicates they really didn't tell me the whole story, or they're very detailed and told me the whole story but left something out, or they're very detailed and they said something which was helpful or hurtful. So you see what I'm doing? Don't get bogged down or worry about, oh my God, I can't, ask that because it's too tiring or it's going to take too long or I look dumb. I don't care what the witness says. I don't care if they put me down. I don't care what they say. Sometimes I might have a retort. But most of the time, I let them say whatever they want. If I really want to get good testimony, I might videotape them. Because video is a great display used at trial. When you see something, it's much more impacting, and you hear something than when you just hear it. Or when they re-testify to it at a trial. The way in which they say it, the inflection, the demeanor, the attitude, whether they're looking away, whether they do it with disdain, whether they're arrogant, whether they're pleasant, whether they're respectful or disrespectful. So those kinds of techniques are very helpful. In today's technology world, there's a lot of companies that are now moving to videoing everything that they take down. Stenography. Okay? So the concept is to understand that can be helpful in different ways. But I want to make sure I go through all of that machination, those questioning techniques, to make sure I understand everything I can regarding what is the basis, the underlying reasons, data, people, things, thought process that gave rise to how they formulated their opinion. I will gain a tremendous amount of information in that area by engaging in that analysis.